the styling pattern. Massive in the cool, them will never feel this. Be the general life, it turn and twist. Massive in the cool, ball me fantastic. Yeah. Collage in the place. One more time, a song come to rule in a design. And when you hear me, I tap on the microphone stand. Everywhere me go, me feel whole place ram. People them they have to run, come. All of you got like a Bible scripture. Wait for Genesis back to Revelation. Everywhere me go, me feel whole place ram. We never get me out that me foundation. Everywhere me go, my fist styling pattern. Yeah. Sick up on the taffy ram party. Sick up on that in the no style. Everywhere me collide them ball out for me. This your one tune off run country. Wanna miss a collage. Here's it.
Hold on the selector. Take your time, it's too fast.
Oh gosh. This shit in the one that me say two in a tree. One a general large run party. Take up on the dash, I go show mercy. Everywhere me go now me too steady. Take up on the dash, I me the big thing one. When me pass you like the wrist and bam. People them on that's all I want to bam bam. When you come up, please give me satisfaction. Take up on the ditch with the mind center. One of me so college me go place right. People come and dash them a little bit over. In the general all with the bam bam. Massive in the food them I feel never feel this. In the general all the turn and twist. Talk about this is so loud and fantastic. Open up your ears and I feel listen for this. One more time. A sound not too crucial. You hear me a tap on the microphone stand. On the Mr. Collage, make a place ram. Sick up on the Safi right version. Everywhere me go on the silent pattern. Massive in the cool, then my turn and twist. That budget the Roman, you're fantastic. Open up your ears and have a listen for this. Everywhere me go on the first class list. One of Mr. Collage, just start for the show. Massive in the cool, them I feel never for this. Even the general, I'm missing lyrics. Bigger than in the southeast and the west. When me pass you like the musical best. Like then you never miss a one upon the one. Hey, the general come for rum session. Everywhere me come like me and Chicago. Sick up on the Safi right version. Massive in the cool, them I love them about. This a general large international. When you pass through that for rum dance hall. When you hear me a tap on the microphone stand. On the Mr. Collage me go place ram. When you hear me a tap on the microphone stand. With me pass through on the silent button. When you hear me a tap on the microphone stand. On the Mr. Collage me go place ram. Here's it. When you hear me a tap on the microphone stand. With me pass through on the silent button. You hear me a tap on the microphone stand. On the Mr. Collage me go place run. People come and them my love it over.
Alright. It's rocking. It's time for the Steve Breit Rock Discovery Show on mildsauce.co. As we do on Saturdays when we can. It's been a little choppy these last few weeks. We've been busy boys around the city and about the country. But glad to be back. So this is a mid-September episode. I think it's been a couple weeks since the last time we got together and had a chance to jam out on some. Where we left off, I think last time we were here, we were wrapping up our multi-part discussion on the Riot Fest festival that was going on in Chicago. And today we're going to be dipping back into another, a little bit more unheralded festival that goes on in Chicago every year. We're going to be talking about the Cold Wave. But before we get into that, how are you doing, Jake?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, just back here trying to put out these fires for the show every week.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks since we've had a chance to hang. I spent some time up in Wisconsin. Jake was out in the sunny west coast of California.
And the sunny St. Louis.
Yeah, sunny St. Louis.
Yeah.
We've been in many time zones, all out and about in the city and in the nation. But we're back now, back to some rock, back to some jam, and back to some Saturday day drinking.
Yes, we are. My bad if got some of those level's a little wonky, but we're back now. Now we're in it. It always takes us a minute.
Yep.
We need like one quick minute to keep it going.
It's a little dicey out in the city today. Pretty windy. Back to hat weather.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely hit the hat weather back like real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been we literally went from air conditioning to winter jackets in a week. But enough about the weather. Like I said, we're going to be dipping into some cold. So this is one of my favorite festival that goes on in the Chicagoland area every year. It is a subtle or subliminal celebration of Wax Trax Records and the scene that used to be back in the day in and around the city of Chicago, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, up into the early 2000s. It kind of went quiet a little bit, as many genres of music do oftentimes, but it's maintained a strong base in the city, as evidenced by this festival's longevity. They've been doing it 7 years in a row, and I think it sells out every single year. I've gone many years. It's always a good night out. It always brings back good memories of, the way the city was a few decades ago. Pretty fun stuff.
What about it reminds you of how it used to be? Like what's different about this festival?
I would say, with this festival, it's a celebration of Wax Trax Records, and not to give, unequal weight towards things, but you think about definitive record labels in Chicago over the years, and obviously Chess Records was just groundbreaking for the artists that they fostered, the scene that they developed in the city that sparked off and moved around the country. And I would say, in similar parallels, you can kind of think of Wax Trax Records in that same way. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s, where, new wave was getting big, post-punk era, post-disco era, and people wanted a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more edgy stylistics to their music. And, Wax Trax kind of really brought that. They heralded in, obviously Ministry being one of the biggest bands that they fostered. But then they also brought in a lot of great European acts and really kind of brought a European-dominated scene into America at a time when it was just kind of coming up, and it really latched on in the city, and I think it left an indelible mark because, like I said, you're not going to get the kind of crowds that the Metro had for this festival, out in Columbus or, Dayton or Cleveland, and I think they started branching out this year. There was a New York one and an L.A. one, but it's been going on in Chicago for almost a decade now.
That's super interesting. It's definitely a sliver of the city I wasn't aware of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think it bookends because this was an anniversary for Wax Trax Records. I think it was a 30th or 40th anniversary this year. So they've got a documentary called The Industrial Accident that's currently...
I like that name.
It's on the, film festival circuit right now. I think... it was just playing in American festivals, and it's moved off to Europe. So I think it's in the Lausanne Film Fest, the October 20th, the Barcelona Film Fest, the Madrid Fest. Then it wraps up at the Denver Film Festival in November. And then we can look to see for the streaming service and physical Blu-ray release in spring of 2019. But, if you're interested in how a scene really kind of grew up in Chicago. I would say, musically and especially underground music back in the day, Chicago didn't have that strong punk foothold that, say, New York or L.A. did. And this was, I think, something that the Midwest and Chicago in particular could really kind of call their own.
That's real. That's cool. I mean, I think Chicago's always... looking for that. I think the city's always looking for something that they can put their arms around, regardless of what it is. They call it their own. So it is cool that it happens so many different ways.
And you think about it, and it's obviously not so much in 2018, but all through the 90s, that was dominated by bands like Ministry or KMFDM, or that stuff inspired stuff like Rob Zombie and all sorts of bands that were of lesser degree of quality, in that same vein, but it all kind of has its roots in Chicago. So it's a pretty unique thing for local music scenes in the country, and it's cool to see that it's still alive and well in the city.
Definitely.
But yeah, why don't we just get back into it? You know,
Hold on,
we've
before
got-
we do,
Oh.
you got to tell us about your beer this week.
Yep. So this week we've got switching over. We've got Maplewood Brewing at 2721 North Maplewood in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, up on the north side. And today we are drinking their Pulaski Pilsner. Celebration, giving a little shout out to Jake's heritage with the Polish pride.
Hey.
Kazimierz Pulaski, the father of the American cavalry, dating back to the Revolutionary War. He's a key figure in the formation of the nation.
Exactly.
And we
And,
have roads
we-
named after him and
we got
forts named after him.
You got the nice red and white going on with the can there.
Mm-hmm. So this is a good Pilsner. It's a German-style Pilsner. It's not like your American, a little bit more watered-down stuff. You know, this is comparable to, say, Bitburger or Pony or Jaeger. You know, it's a nice, strong, bold Pilsner. It's a 5.1 ABV, IBU at 25, so it doesn't have too much of a hoppy kick to it. But it's a nice day drinker and, you know, good to see a Chicago, a nice Chicago strong Pilsner. So cheers to everybody for the beers. And then this leads into the shirt. So the shirt this week, I picked this up from the headlining set of Frontline Assembly at the Sunday finale show of Cold Waves this year. And this was part of the big Wax Trax exhibition. Like I said, there was an anniversary. So with Cold Waves this year, they did a special screening of the Wax Trax documentary, and they had an old Wax Trax pop-up shop at the Metro, so you can kind of relive the old scene.
That's pretty
cool. They had record stores in two different locations, one on Damon way back in the day, and then they moved off to Lincoln, and I remember both of those locations. It was really cool scene, really cool shop, and it's definitely nice to see that stuff back out and about in the city. But let's dip right into the music. So we're going to listen to a little bit of Frontline Assembly. The track we're going to listen to is Liquid Separation off of Millennium. So this is kind of evolutionarily. They'd gotten out of their Wax Trax phase. Ministry had come out with Psalm 69. So all the industrial bands were kind of following the leader and getting real heavy with the guitars and a little bit more metal influenced, and you can kind of hear that one in this track. So why don't we just dip right into it?
Let's get into it. And this one we have coming up is Liquid Separation by Frontline Assembly.
Watch 12, we're interrupting our regular programming because there's been some kind of catastrophe downtown that we want to tell you about. There are crowds all around us, police all around us.
Saturday, jamming out to a little bit of old school frontline assembly. And like I said, this is a bit of a scene back in the day, and it's cool to see that, at least one weekend a year it kind of comes back in full force. And I gotta say, back when the Cubs were in the World Series a couple years ago, Cold Waves was going on that weekend that the World Series came to Chicago. I believe that was Game 3 or Game 4, and it was a very funny sight because I was at the Metro at the Cold Wave show while the Cubs were playing just across the street in Game 3 or 4 of the World Series, and the concert got out right around the same time that the Cubs game got out. And at that point, the city had put like the garbage trucks up and down Clark, so there was no car traffic. It was completely closed off, and it was just foot traffic all in the street.
It almost turns into like a street fest after that.
It definitely was. But there was such a weird like juxtaposition of like shit-faced Cub fans in like red and blue stumbling, like all these like old-time goth and industrial people and like south.
Really funny.
Definitely one of the weirder times walking out of a concert in my life in the city, but good stuff. And like I said, this has been going on for 7 years now. This year's lineup was a pretty good one. It was Meat Beat Manifesto was the Saturday night headliner. Ogre was the Friday night headliner, I believe, and Frontline Assembly was the Sunday night headliner. There was a lot of great new and old industrial bands, and a lot of stuff actually that we've talked about in past episodes, especially the Chicago band Them, I think, on a spring episode. And I think we've talked about Black Queen also in the past, and that was astute listeners will recall that is the lead singer of Dillinger Escape Plan, trying a completely new genre from the explosive math metal of his former band. So it's a cool juxtaposition, and I think he played Cold Waves 2 years ago, and that was their 4th live performance. So it was really cool to see the evolution of that band. There was some interesting cancellations. So D. Krupp, who was supposed to be the second headliner on Sunday, they had visa problems and couldn't get into the country.
Interesting.
So, and, I've noticed that, and I don't know if that's something that's been happening, you know what I mean, like for many years, but I have noticed it over the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's like our changes in like immigration policy or visa policy, but like at South by.
Oh yeah, you remember you telling me about that a couple years ago, right?
South by, there was several bands that were getting barred from entry, so it's unfortunate when that happens, but the lineup kind of withstood the loss nonetheless, so that was pretty good. And I think getting to it, it was a cool, like I said, confluence of new and old. And like I mentioned earlier, Black Queen, they were a highlight, and I think they're the next track up on the lineup. So
I believe they are. We got the Secret Scream Hates remix.
So we can dip into a little bit of Black Queen. They're a little bit different vibe from the last band we checked out. They're more in the dark wave that's kind of coming out of Austin and bubbling up again in the area. So nice little change of pace. And why don't we dip into it?
Let's change the pace. Here is Black Queen.
Lord, away from everything in love that burns so easily. Shy away from pleasure for the fear of the pain. I feel your secret scream next to me. to catch you in. I need to see you open up for me. I need to get you inside of me. I need to see you open up for me. Ooh, I need to get you in. I need to get you in.
Dwells thus as if unable to move again, or no will left to move again, not enough will left to move again.
Now, unfortunately, Author and Punisher is one of these bands that a buddy of mine from work turned me on to recently, and I was really psyched to see that they were playing the festival this year. But the way things worked out, and especially with Riot Fest the weekend before, my bank account took a real fucking hard hit, and I had a tough time making more than one night. So Author and Punisher played Saturday night. I could not go to see that set, but if you ever have an opportunity, I highly recommend it. This guy is he's a one-man band, and he's an engineer himself with equipment. And
is this that crazy son of a bitch you were showing me?
yeah, I was showing you that video. It's insane.
It is
He's
really
got his
wild.
like drum machine attached to his right arm and a keyboard on his left arm, and
It looks like some shot of like Waterworld or something.
yeah, and his mic is like 10 or 12 different mics, and whatever effect he wants, he sings into a different mic. It's some serious shit, and
Definitely looks like he's plugged into the Matrix.
yeah. Definitely some cyberpunk some vibes going on with that. And like I said, I was really disappointed to be missing out on him, but I was glad to see that he was included on the festival lineup this year. So that was really cool. And, you know, that's another thing that I think is really fun about this festival. You know, it kind of keeps the sound and the scene alive by not just focusing on the bands that kind of had their heyday back in the 20th century. You know, they're bringing out these 21st century bands that are carrying on the sound and the style, and I'm really appreciative of that. You know, Black Queen, they played Sunday night, like I said. They put on a great set. I'd seen them before. They had done their fourth live show at Cold Waves a couple years ago, so it was cool to see their evolution. And again, it's nice and refreshing to see bands still kind of carrying that sound and bringing it into the 21st century and not making it sound dated and doing some new and interesting stuff with it. So
And building machines and things.
yeah. But yeah, you know, like I said, it was a good night. I really wanted to go see Saturday night's set. That was Me Pete Manifesto headlining, but I saw them the last that I think has been able to or you know very early industrial trancy space dub, and then they into drum and bells of the era. And like I said, you know, more taking their own path and leading rather than following, which is something I've
No, yeah, you got me intrigued.
yeah. And a particular more abrasive you know, mechanical sound, I think, was associated with Wax Tracks, and it's neat to see how the bands kind of made their mark there, and then this festival, it's always a really fun night out, and I got to tell you, at one point I was kind of like looking listen to this specific style of music. You know, bathrooms are nasty. You know, it's like it in its
Yeah, like since the Congress and everything is gone, it's like the last venue
which is a nice new addition. And
Nice new addition.
I don't know about you, but I'm not the biggest fan of Concord. And
Yeah, the space is just kind of like open in a weird way. That's, I don't know. Yeah, they have like the weird balconies on the sides. I don't. On like either side, and you're not on the first.
I'm always curious about like booking agents and how that goes there. But the one a foothold in that area in that last 5 years, and they've been gentrified or they change, and it's cool.
But there are still a few left.
Mm-hmm. That will ever be open up.
Guy that was doing the what was it yeah, that one, the Cadillac Theater.
Cadillac Palace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that place. That's the guy who's redoing the Congress now. No.
But yeah, talking Chicago music and this. This is a band that played on Sunday. Ones. They were what into a band that I one of the newer bands that's really kind of turning me on, and they're called Hyde.
are contagion. We are contagion. To parasite nations. Disease like
All right, and we're back. Mild Sauce Live, jamming out to a couple tracks. We heard Continues with Reckless Heart. Then we jumped into Frontline Assembly with Contagion. And abrasive ministry influence right now. Yeah, yeah. So I definitely dig them, and I'm appreciative that they're kind of bringing that rawness into the city. It's definitely something that's welcome around here. So good stuff. And like I said, Frontline Assembly was the Sunday night headliner. They put on a great show. It had been a long, long time since I'd seen them last. They were cool, and again, everything kind of loops back to Wax Trax Records and the appreciation. And one thing that I really kind of a little bit nervous, like, oh, you go to a show where you haven't seen the band in like 10, 15 years, and you're like, oh, I have not bought like their newest records. I don't know what the fuck they're gonna play. And, they definitely played. They played some stuff that I hadn't heard before, but they ended it on a deep cut track from a project they put out on Wax Trax. Well, for like I said, fans of Wax Trax, fans of like deep cut industrial music in Chicago, to hear a track that probably very few people have ever actually heard live. So that was really fun. But wrapping up, like I said, check out the Wax Trax documentary, An Industrial Accident, that will be released. And around the world. Also, absolutely shout outs. Shout out Jake. Without the show, without Jake, we couldn't have this show going. So, fucking shout out to Jake, waking him up today. Shout outs as all coming up next. So shout out to Mars. And then on Sunday we've got fucking who has done a lot of solo work over the course of his career. So good stuff. And we will dip out on that. And without further ado, let's jump into that, and then we'll see you again in future weeks with we've got a lot of stuff. This is one of those weeks where Jake and I were talking about it. September 15th to October 15th is Mexican Heritage Month or Latin Heritage Month. What's up with that? You get a half a month 1 month and a half a month the other. Yeah, so I wanted to do a cool Latin ep or Latin month, and then teach me Spanish so I don't embarrass myself on a weekly basis. Like I said, Wax Tracks, there's a Wax Tracks anniversary going on. I wanted to do an appreciation episode for that, and I've seen several concerts that we have yet to talk about. So there's a lot in upcoming episodes. Be on the lookout. And without that, let's dip into Ogre, and then we will see you again soon.
Catatonic, a distant high. On a toxic ride. A demagogue that takes the snake will bite. Lost pay, a working substitute for all we really want for you. Thine hope is fucking with the dopes and warning when they fail to choose. You got to do. What do you got? It's living in your mouth. When the bomb starts to then you got to live.
Reset the clock to 0.